boy, he's just really traveling, right? Podfest and now this. Who knows where he's going to be next? So before we bring up our guests, I just want to run the intro and welcome in.
Looks like your business might be in a bit of a pickle. Don't you worry about a thing. You ain't alone in this. You're just a success story waiting to happen. Trust me on that. Every bump in the road is just an opportunity wearing a clever disguise. Welcome to the Hounds of Business community, where we don't just sit around twiddling our thumbs. Nope. We turn those obstacles into mighty fine stepping stones. This here's a place where high-level entrepreneurs and sharp professionals gather to grow their businesses and mindsets, kind of like how a good old gumbo needs the right ingredients to be something special. Ideas thrive here, and collaborations, well, they're as natural as sweet tea on a hot day. Success, it's a journey, and we're fixing to walk that road right beside you. Now, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn for all the latest tips and insights. We're talking about the kind of wisdom that'll keep you ahead of the game. And while you're at it, head on over to our YouTube channel. We've got ourselves a treasure trove of videos, from expert interviews to webinars, everything you need to stay sharp in this fast-moving world of business. The Hounds of Business community? Well, we ain't just a network, we're a movement. So why not come on and be part of something bigger? Join us today and let's turn your business journey into a real Southern success story. Together, we'll achieve greatness. Just like crawfish and singing on a Friday night.
Oh, so good to have you here. We're here to talk about beyond the uniform, healing, leadership, and the future of work for those who have served, right? Leaders transitioning from pressure-driven performing, right, into sustainable leadership. And that is so important because tonight's conversation really does hold a special place in my heart, as my husband served in the Navy for 26 years. And I saw, his transition of what leadership looked like while he was serving, and then how it shifted as he went into the private sector. And it's really interesting to see the dynamics change. And you would think, oh, one person in the military and segue into the private or into civilian world should be easy, a cakewalk. Well, it's not. It is not. It takes a lot of courage and commitment to rediscover who you are and to understand how different environments work, how different systems, right? How different people and programming works as well. So this is one of the many reasons why I love the Hounds of Business Network, because we bring forward real conversations that aren't polished, right? We sit down for these conversations that are relatable and look beneath the surface of titles, and understand the human experience that we're bringing forward behind. That's what leadership really is. So that's what we're doing here tonight. And each of our guests bring a perspective shaped by services, by their responsibility, and also by those really key moments where it asks them to grow in ways most people would never see. So one of our guests is Christopher Colombo. He spent years at the intersection of medicine, leadership, psychology, and military service. In fact, he's still an active MD, which I find is fascinating. And his experience reaches into the places where pressure is constant and decisions carry the real weight, right? He brings depth and insight to what leaderships and leaders really looks like, I should say. I'm getting all Twitter-pated and tongue-tied because I'm so excited for this conversation tonight. And also we have Beverly Neal Clinton. I absolutely adore her, and I know you will too. If you don't know Beverly, you need to get to know her. And she's worked through different organizations to think about healing and integrity. Her work shows through the systems that can either support people or quietly wear them down. And her clarity comes through her Marine background of her service. And unfortunately tonight, Timothy Murray is not here with us because he's literally in the field serving his people. So we miss you, Timothy. I hope that you get to watch this replay. But I want to just bring our guests up to the stage and welcome in Beverly and Christopher. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thanks, April. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to see you.
Oh, it's always great to have you both. And I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday, Christopher. This is what I do when I get to know people, whether they're a hound or not. I'm curious. I want to learn more about people. And so Christopher carved out some time with me yesterday and talked about who he is and how he approaches leadership of the world, which I find very fascinating. But before we get into the real discussion here, I want to just bring up just to go back a little bit, right? I'm asking you to kind of rewind a little bit, both of you. In the very beginning, before the titles and the achievements, there's usually a moment or an experience that shapes our relationship, especially in service. So can you share just a little bit, like early influence, or maybe it's a memory that you still hold, right? That happened to you when you early on in your career that taught you about what responsibility really meant, and how is that carried forward in what you do today? Beverly, Christopher. Crickets here. Did I ask too many questions at once? I know it's kind of a
no.
That's a deep one right off the spot. So Beverly, I'm happy to let you go first.
Oh, thank you so much, Christopher. I appreciate you. So it's interesting when you were speaking about your husband. My husband is a Navy vet as well as I am a Marine. And that, you're right. I remember when he had been in for 14 years. And when he injured his knee, it was hard for him because he still felt that he had so much more to give. And what popped into my head was, I remember when, he'd been sitting on the couch for about a month. And I'm letting him work through it. And at that time, I was a court stenographer. So I'd come in from court and he was still in the same chair he was. And when I left that morning, and I said to him, I said, listen, I know it feels like the end of the world for you because this is all you know. I mean, this man loved being in the Navy. He loved the structure. He loved his job. He loved all of it. And he was very good at it. So when he wasn't able to have that anymore, I said, you know what? Sometimes life throws you a curveball and you just have to pivot with it. And I remember when he said, oh, what about if I become a policeman? I said, your brain is too beautiful for that. Not downplaying policemen, but my husband and I are high school sweethearts. We've known each other forever. And when you're riding in a car with a man who is at 17, and you know how like sometimes when the light hits the mirror, so you get that refraction of light, I could see that man starting in his head to calculate the speed, rate, and then I'm like, hey, come back. I need, and that's the way his brain has always been. So he's a high performance computing engineer. If he's not engaged, I have seen this man in meetings go to sleep because, they're not keeping up. So for me, it was seeing this amazing person falling into the doldrums because his life changed. And it wasn't just affecting him, it was affecting us. So once we had that little coming to Jesus meeting, he got on the stick and I had been holding on to his jacket as he's riding through. So yeah, for me, that was my moment.
Yeah, witnessing your husband going through that, and you know, it does take those real conversations to you know, find a way, but find that inspiration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Christopher, I'm curious about you, and, you know, if there was an influence or a defining moment that taught you what responsibility really meant when you were in the service.
Yeah, so this is something that's come up. My wife and I have talked about this, and it's you're not the only high school sweethearts out there, Beverly. My wife and I started dating when we were 17 and 19.
Wow.
And it's been a minute. I won't say how many minutes, but it's been a minute.
We were at 14 and 16.
Wow. So it still does happen. What was funny though was we had repeated conversations, whether it was attending each other's graduation, frankly, on the way from the church to our reception after we got married, you know, medical school. I'm like, do you feel any different? And she said, you know, no. And, you know, both of us just sort of, I mean, she was never really a smart ass teenager. That was my job. But I still sort of felt like the overgrown smart ass adolescent I always felt like, except for I think two experiences in my life have actually, I felt different on the other side when they happened. One of them was deploying, you know, as part of my service. And, you know, you form incredible relationships and bonds in that you could only describe as the most positive experiences in your life, in the most hellish, inhumane environment and experience that you can imagine. And having to hold that paradox in your head for the rest of your life is just something that changes you. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, April, is that, you know, people come home with, you know, varying size rocks in their rucksack. That might be a bunch of gravel and sand at the bottom. It might be one big rock they're toting around, but everybody comes home a little different. And the only other experience I've ever had that's made me any different, taught me, and you mentioned responsibility. This one counts for both, whether it's responsibility to my unit, my country, or, you know, whoever's standing next to me on the job. The other is becoming a father. You know, my wife and I figured, well, we got this. We're both doctors. It's going great. And my kid hit the atmosphere, and then we looked at each other and I said, we just made another person, and we are responsible for everything about this human. And of course, I thought when we had my daughter, I'm like, totally got this. You know, we've done this before. No, when you add girl dad to your resume, it's definitely another change. And it's a similar, I mean, how are you going to relate wartime and raising children? I'm going to right now.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it is the same level of deep connection and joy and most positive thing you'll ever do, simultaneously with the greatest worry and fear you could ever have. And again, balancing those two things in raising your children or in managing combat, that it's strange that there's a common theme between the two, but they both do. And I think responsibility is a good lesson from either. You're changed because you are now responsible for something other than yourself.
Yes.
Oh, most definitely. I can completely, I mean, I didn't wear the uniform, but I was along for the ride for 24 years. And it just knowing that responsibility and that integrity that still shines throughout, as you said, Christopher, throughout, you know, raising children, Beverly, you know, engaging with your husband and being that person for him. Leadership doesn't just fall away because of the uniform or a badge or a title or retirement happens. As you both have, you know, quote unquote, somewhat, you know, retired from the military or shifted away from that. So what was that like for each of you to step from one leadership role into the next?
I think for me, I remember when I decided to go into the Marine Corps, both my brother and sister were already in college and they anticipated that I would go as well. So for me to announce, no, I'm not going to college. Yes, I've signed up for the Corps. You'd have thought, I don't know, you'd have thought I said Jesus already came back and we missed the boat. So they were not happy with me at all. I don't have strong enough adjectives to describe how they were in another orbit. And I remembered at that time, my brother was working for NBC. So occasionally he'd come out to California to, do his thing. And his friends would say, hey, man, your sister, what does she do? Well, she's in the Marine Corps. And I would look at him and he would be like, so I'm the youngest of three. And when you're the youngest, you're always playing catch up. So for me, leadership made sense because I didn't have anybody else. My parents were a little bit older and my sister and brother were already gone. And luckily they left a really good pathway for me. They had already set the standards, set the bars, and it was up to me to catch up and keep up. So that was just a natural progression for me to from being the cheerleader to being the person who only needed one credit to graduate from high school, and I could have taken that in the summer, to going into the Corps and then realizing, and that's the other thing about boot camp. In boot camp, you realize a lot about yourself. Whatever your shortcomings were, boot camp can hone in those. Really, you get clarity very quickly about, whether or not you're going to make it. Because I think I shared this story with you before about when I went in for boot camp, there was a young lady who became catatonic. They got in her head and they literally moved her like a piece of furniture. And I remember thinking, I don't care what it takes. What is this? 16 weeks? Oh yeah, I am everything. I'm doing it. And it just refocuses your strengths. And then the Corps picks those up. And then they polish them and they dust them off. And then they show you the new shiny version of yourself. And then you just keep moving in that direction.
That's so interesting. The psychology of it, and it kind of like reinventing. And yes, my son just went through boot camp a little over a year ago, and
didn't he?
Definitely. Well, yes, and he was. Oh my goodness. He was the guy that called the cadence. I forgot what it's called.
Yes.
And did he ever speak out loud in school? No. But he was the one that would sit in the back and watch everything and know exactly, so they put him up front, right, to get that out of him. And so that was kind of cool to know that he was doing that. And yeah, they hone in on those things, and they might pick it apart, but that's really actually asking you to become a leader, asking you to step forward through those fears and acknowledging those other parts of yourself. And speaking of psychology and shifting that, Christopher, what do you feel or think, or your experiences about that with military life and shifting into the private or civilian world, the psychology aspects of it?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is that mindset difference. Beverly described it. What I would say from a positive psychology perspective is you show up at boot camp and you're continually making promises to your future self. And then the goal is to get you to fulfill them. Nobody cares if you were the quiet person in the back. They know your potential is to be the person who calls cadence. And that's the goal, is you've made a promise to your future self to fulfill your potential as best you can. and there is no place to hide. They're going to find that. I think with the justification for that, I mean, obviously a lot of people, they wonder, isn't it intimidating? Isn't it scary? Yes, it's intimidating and it's scary and it's stressful. But what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to prepare you for military service and war. It turns out that's a whole bunch more stressful than basic could ever try to be, no matter how bad it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And the civilian world, in many instances, the stakes are simply not that high. And so the insistence that your mindset always be focused on a promise to your future self to fulfill your potential isn't there without a great deal of initiative, or if you're lucky, a leader and a mentor to help you cultivate that mindset. But it's an expectation and part of your new normal in uniform versus it's a bit more hit or miss in the civilian world.
I wanted to interject on that. You're right. I find myself using that same analogy. I want to step back just a little bit, because what boot camp does is it breaks you down so that it can build you back up. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's anyone who's gone through boot camp knows that's what they're doing. And then the other side to that is you begin to surprise yourself because you didn't know that you could do these things. And so then you begin to expand, and that's when you start to grow. And that's when you you think that boot camp is really hard, but you're absolutely right. It prepares you for what can happen when you go into combat. Many of us come back with PTSD because that's not a video game. That's real life. For my husband to be standing on the side of a boat, and to see the devastation, and you're not ready for that, you come back very different. And that's what Chris was talking about. You just come back different after that. And then you learn how to navigate within this new world. So for me, this is again something that Christopher alluded to. When you're in the military, you understand that's life or death. So when you're in the civilian world and I don't know, you missed a deadline and you're like, why are you freaking out? Because nobody died because you missed that deadline. Whereas in the military, that could be the alternative. So when you look at it in that perspective, when you're dealing with civvies, you're like, oh, Lord, bless their little hearts. And then you just work with them because that's where they are.
Yes. And it's really, that person's only their perceptions, right? That what they have been exposed to in their life, the nervous system doesn't know whether it is in ground combat or in the boardroom combat, and it's going to behave and take over, right? You got that wonderful amygdala that just puts you right in that fight, flight, freeze, and has you show up that way, very reactionary, protected, just being in that space. And so as you both shifted away from military, how did that help with your leadership style?
My husband says he will personally never work for me again. Because my mother used to say, if you can't do it right the first time, when do you have time to do it twice? So I and then being a court reporter, writing for people at 95% accuracy at 225 words a minute, you just kind of have this way about you. And as my husband said, when I was a court reporter, he walked into a convention that we were having once, and he said, oh my God, I thought only you had this personality. It's like it's a room full of you. I think for me, the military clarified how I see things. Um, I'm a bit more binary now. It's like either it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that's really okay, because we need all kinds to make the world go around. And my husband does remind me that I can't use my litmus on everybody else. That's not the way it works. So I just, I just want it done to the best of your ability. I want you to be efficient, and I want you to make an impact so that if you engage, someone can say, you know what, my life is a little bit different and a little bit better now because she showed up. I don't ever want anyone to say, God, don't ever work with her again. That would hurt me to my heart. And I would have to be like, unpacking that to find out why, what happened. Because we all have process improvements, but you kind of know what your areas are, and then you tweak those just a little bit so that it becomes even more efficient, more effective, more of a complement to what you're doing. So that's what it's clearly done for me.
Yeah, we're all a work in progress. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Christopher? How has working or being in the military, influenced your leadership style? How does it continue? Or as Beverly said, shift and
my leadership style shifted dramatically while I was still in the military. And having a bit of a double dose of that idea of, life and death urgency, both as a military person and a physician, you can very easily turn into the hammer. And if there's nothing but nails around, then you're really useful. But the minute that there's eggs and babies about and all you have to swing is your hammer, you need some other tools in the toolbox. So I had a bit of a mismatch between my temperament and the job culture for a leadership position I was in, and it went terribly. And I was eventually relieved from that leadership position. And then with 4 years to go on my career, it was time for reinvention, rebirth, and getting into a different leadership position where I was doing a lot of funded research and innovation in virtual health and telemedicine and tech space. And the pandemic hit during that time. There was a lot of working with civilians and military and contractors and researchers, and a much wider variety of personality types, baselines of how people would interact, levels of people skills and emotional intelligence, and having to adjust to have a lot more tools in the toolbox to assemble strange teams of odd bedfellows. That opened my eyes wide to being ready to lead and mentor and develop leaders and mentors as a civilian, because this happens to medical personnel all the time, happens to military personnel, as Beverly alluded to, or in high precision professions like court reporter or something, where if your pharmacist miscounts that dose, that's okay. No, it isn't. It really isn't. So hey, we just gave you the wrong medication to your loved one and they didn't make it. That's nobody, I say that flippantly, because when we say that stakes are life and death, they are. But when you transition into, other jobs and other professions outside of those, not every military task is combat. Not every medical task is reviving a cardiac arrest victim. And in the civilian world, not everything has that urgency. And okay, if we're constantly on the edge of, as you said, fight, flight, or freeze, we're not running from saber-toothed tigers, but your midbrain and your cortex are still battling about what's a threat and what's not. And it could be that email was in all caps. That might be the worst threat you see that day.
Oh, yes.
And all of the baggage that comes with it from that peer, that subordinate, that direct report to you. And then pausing, some mindfulness, some awareness of your body and breathing so that you can get your cortex into the game and not just the amygdala, and stop and go, okay, is an email ever life or death? No, I'm gonna have a deep breath. I'm gonna go get some coffee, and I'm gonna come back, and then I'm going to help this person step back from the ledge, and I'm not going to be the one that runs up and tackles them while they're at the edge. I was that hammer running around hitting, eggs, nails, and babies. And now, little older, little wiser, my toolbox, I have, the cordless driver, the monkey wrench, the hammer, duct tape, WD-40. There's a few other tools in there for other situations. And it turns out you're more versatile as a leader and a mentor, the more that you can individualize that situation. And, to key off what Beverly said, there's a thought that when you are, humane and calm and non-urgent in your approach, that you are now inviting in substandard performance, or, that it's okay if that court reporter is, 86% accurate. It is not, but is hitting them over the head as hard as you can the way to get them to 95, or is figuring it out with them together collaboratively as a mentor that's interested in their growth, that's engaging with them with, an unqualified positive regard? Is that more effective? And that is honestly my partner at my blog, Paul. He was a very important peer mentor for me. He was my intern 100 years ago, and then was a peer of mine when I was going through my career calamity, and was finally the person to get through to me, where he just stopped and he said, look, every time you're going to open your mouth, ask yourself this question: do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's on Post-it notes on my computer, on my journal. And that's just, that's the single most useful phrase. And that's why I call Paul a peer mentor. We've gotten each other through a bunch of things. And that's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, there's a difference in winning versus being effective. Okay, I know which one I'll choose, because if I'm effective, then the odds are my team, my partner, my protege, my organization's going to win, even if I don't personally.
Yes. And that's what a real leader is. Okay. It's not about being right. It's about the whole team and working together towards that cause. And Beverly, I know that what you're doing with Tim is just that, with the healing for wounds. And this is the healing aspect of this conversation too, as well as your practice, Christopher. So Beverly, can you give more insight to healing for wounds? How did that come about with you and Tim?
It's interesting. Tim, I know Tim from maybe 4 years ago. Yeah, around 4 years ago. And he'd ask me to work with him. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to be a good match. and he was patient. And, he would come back and say, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, good, thank you. Keep it moving. And eventually, he caught me in a moment when I was like, I could actually hear what he was saying. And I alluded to this earlier when we were backstage. He has so much information. He's like a Rolodex. It's like, there's some card somewhere that he knew somebody and they met. And just even in the recesses of his brain, when I'm thinking I have something figured out and I'll run it by him, and then he gives me like a shorter version of something that, would have taken me days to figure out. And he's like, no, go do this, talk to this person. So needless to say, he's patient because he waited for me to get here. And we started talking about, how could we change the way we do medicine? What's going to make us different? So we came up with the healing for wounds, and then with the revenue doctors. And the whole purpose of that is here in the state of New Mexico, and Christopher and I have talked about this earlier, we're known as a medical desert here because we're losing doctors. And we're losing doctors because the medical malpractice has gone through the roof. Then you factor in shortages of staff. And then I think we're like in the top 5 states where there's more land than people. So we're spread out all over the place. And when you have those rural hospitals, those rural clinics, where they may not even be able to pay for their services, so they're baking bread or they're giving chickens or whatever it is, that's a real thing that still happens here. Or the doctor's been there. That same doctor was there to deliver you. That's now delivering your children's babies. That's the continuity that we're used to here. And so when we saw that being affected, we said, there's got to be a better way and another way, another alternative for us to make a difference. So with chronic wounds, what ends up happening, it affects everybody. It's not just one person. It's the person, it's their family, it's the community, it's how they present. And when we were able to find out that there are programs within Medicare that will actually reimburse the doctors so that they don't have to amputate, because an amputation, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's like $6 million. So when you're looking at an amputation, now you're drastically changing that person's quality of life, how they're going to navigate, how they show up, their mental psyche, how they navigate in the world. When we're offering you an alternative to get you back to your life within 6 weeks or less, that's for you. That's all for you. And then the doctor's compensated within 6 weeks or less. So that's additional revenue for them. We've taken the heavy lifting because we do all the things that you don't want to do, but you've left $187,000 on the table that you didn't even know about. So now we're helping you to go garner that. So we're bringing money back in. We're contributing to the patients so they can get back to their life. We're giving the doctors money that they didn't even know they had. It's like a win-win-win. And then we're actually able to change the community. We're actually able to change the community because now the people are healthier. The doctor has more funds. They're not short-staffed and running around. And it's not like that's an isolated thing. It's not like, oh, it just happens every once in a while. No, that unfortunately is our new normal. So that's where, again, telehealth comes into play. That's where having therapists comes into play. Mm-hmm. That's where we all have that phone. And there's an app on the phone. It's called Selfie to Healthy. You literally take a picture of your face. Chris is nodding, and it reads on a subcutaneous level, and it's like 95% accurate. So that's your blood pressure, your heart rate, all of those things that you would normally have to go through if you're in triage, and bam, you know exactly where you stand. That's what I mean when I say we have got to do things differently, because if we continue to, what did Einstein say? What's the definition of insanity?
Yes.
That's it. So that's, we just said we can do better. We can, and even with Tim being out right now, we really do take pride in servicing our people. When you're at somebody's house and you're talking with them about a policy, they're trying to give you pozole, you're like, all right, fine, because I hadn't eaten today either. So that totally works for me. Let's do some pozole and carne asada. That's when you know that you're more than just their agent. You're a trusted source. You're someone that they can talk to, and they know that you've got their back.
It's so important, that trust factor, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Especially with health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Chris said, you can't you can't give them the wrong medication and go, oh, I'm sorry. That so doesn't work.
Yeah, Chris, I saw you nodding when Beverly was talking.
Yeah, it's amazing that she's found a way to kind of square the circle of fixing a problem, preventing a problem from getting worse, and the doctor getting paid for it and the patient getting well. I see the very worst end of what happens in chronic wounds when they don't heal in the intensive care unit, because eventually that person gets septic, and it's not just a matter of how do we manage this wound in the office. It's how do I return this person to normal organ function, and then we'll worry about what the long-term plan for that wound is if they survive this. So it's not a trivial problem by any means. And the model in healthcare reimbursement is very much skewed towards, well, we know that when they amputated, they did a thing, so we'll pay for that, versus you prevented complications from happening, but you didn't have to do much to do that, so we're not paying for that. So what's really innovative and impactful about what she's doing is finding a way to prevent all kinds of downstream complications and terrors to restore someone to health in a much less invasive way than when it's at the other end of the spectrum where I work, and allowing that physician in their office to have then the freedom and the margin to be able to do other things that maybe aren't reimbursed so well, because it's always the thing in private practice, particularly in clinics and offices, that you're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul at some point in your reimbursement, right? You are going to be doing something that is important and impactful and fulfills your oath and takes the health of your patients to be paramount and doesn't pay worth a darn. And you're going to be figuring out some other revenue stream to keep your lights on, keep your staff hired, so that you can do and be available for all those things. The joke we had with some hospital administrators that you could paint them into the trap. They'd be like, well, we need you to do more with less. I'm like, wow, if you take that to its logical extreme, you want me to do everything with nothing. And, that was just our snarky frying pan to the head to say that is not a sustainable model of improvement. We need to think differently about it. And it's brilliant work that Beverly's doing.
I would love to take all the credit for like having this idea, but I just kind of saw the pieces. Tim and I looked at the pieces and we're like, I think this puzzle just needs to shift a little bit. I'm not trying to shave off the edge because I really do need that piece, but I think we just need to shift the angle. And then when we do that, look at that. It really is a beautiful picture. It isn't just this thing it's not the macaroni painting that my kid did. This is really closer to being a Picasso. This is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's going to be a thing with telemedicine soon, if the exception for where the originating site versus where the service takes place and where the provider is, because I think telemedicine is one of the things that fits right in a model of what Beverly's talking about with, if a person can quickly get managed, restored to health, or health sustained through a virtual portal without having to, in my area, fight through interstate traffic and then find parking where you're going to find in the city, or in Beverly's environment, travel hundreds of miles potentially for an office visit that could have been done over the phone, by email, or by virtual, right? If you don't pay for that restoration of health, then you create a disincentive for people to use that service, which is better for patients, and it's not a cure-all. It doesn't work for everything. There's some things that need to be done physically and in person, but you create the room for that, both financially and in the schedule and in the amount of work hours and man hours you have to put in, by not doing things that you don't have to do. I mean, it sounds so bloody obvious when I say it like that, but it took something like a worldwide once-in-a-century pandemic for everybody to be forced to use something like telemedicine and people to realize, oh, this has knock-on unintended consequences that are actually positive externalities for once. There are obviously negative ones when it's misused, like anything, but again, we're days away from that model getting kicked in the wrong direction, and it's unfortunate. More things need to be moving in that direction, like Beverly's approach to wound care and how people are, innovating to be able to keep their lights on as a clinic, pay their staff, and also take good care of their patient population.
And another thing, Christopher, too, with the studies have shown that when our older demographic is engaged, they don't, you know where I'm headed. The Alzheimer's and the dementia doesn't come into play as fast. So with telemedicine, we are able to have therapists who actually call the patients at least once a week, and they're engaging them. They're engaging them in conversations. They're finding out how they're doing. If there are any problematic areas, they let the doctor know. What does that do? That lowers the readmission rates for hospitals. It keeps the doctor in the loop so that all they're doing is making calls to follow up. And sometimes the patients even tell the therapist things that they don't even tell the doctors.
All the time.
So there are these relationships that are being created so that if and when the patient does need to come in, everybody's in the know, and you're not like trying to remember, did I tell them about and did I remember to do? There's none of that. And as a result of that, the doctor's star ratings go up, so his bonuses go up. Right now, they're being penalized anywhere from 9 to 12% because they're not doing the annual wellness visits, which again are part of the things that they hate to do, but that's leaving a lot of money on the table. That's why I say we do the grunt work. We do the heavy lifting. All you have to do is at the end of the day, look and see who we said needs your attention. And again, the patient now says, oh, my doctor's more engaged. He knows what I'm going through. And the patient's like, okay, I've already said everything. It's just with communication, there is a send and then there's a receive. The great part is, again, in the middle with the acknowledgement. And that's what this does. This keeps everyone in the loop.
Yeah, and we were pleasantly surprised with the ease of adoption. There was, older people aren't going to use technology. They're using it, right? Take some extra time. And, my father is very fond of telling me this still in his 80s. I didn't get old by being stupid. Okay.
I love that.
The approach for the amount of just preconceived notion that cuts off good ideas. That's one of old people will never use technology. You know what? The generation that invented this stuff we're now getting into our 50s and 60s, folks. So yeah, old people will use it because we all have been. And in terms of outreach, health equity, there's a great chasm between rich and poor in this country. But by survey data and census data, there is not a huge chasm in who owns a smartphone or an internet capable device.
So true.
And even in population dense centers where you may have large economic gaps, you got good internet coverage. So this is another one of those interventions that can actually take, theoretical discussions and pontificating about health equity into action that will actually make a difference. I know, scary. It's in terms of rural health. That was what I did at the last 4 years of my career was virtual health in the military, which might as well be another application of rural. You've got austere environments. We were researching tech and developing it during the pandemic to do telecritical care outreach to rural hospitals that, their usual go-to would be to send their sick patients to a tertiary or quaternary referral center. Sorry, Charlie, they're all full. You just became an intensivist. Not without the ICU training I had, unfortunately, but you can get me on the phone and you're a family medicine, internal medicine, pediatric. You graduated from the 27th grade like I did. You just did a different flavor, but you're pretty sharp. You did critical care at some point. And I could talk you through the rest. It was something that just leveled the playing field. And all of that technology, if I can reach forward to a medic in an austere environment, then we can connect a subspecialist and a rural hospital here in a very resource-rich environment, right? And have the same effect. It just seemed like when the urgency of the pandemic went away, so did our brains. In terms of policy support and innovation. We're like, great, crisis over. We can go back to the way things were. Just not how any of this works.
No. And I absolutely, I hope everybody saw that dynamics of what Beverly does and what Christopher does and how they put it all together. I loved how you talked about the back end of what me as a patient doesn't see. is totally oblivious to all of that. And by you both sharing that the dynamics, then it just kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. You got to see a broader perspective of what's happening with healthcare. And I'm so grateful, Beverly, that you and Tim are out there doing this work, and that you, Christopher, are that person in the ER and bedside and supporting patients and staff also. It's so needed. This is, go ahead, Beverly.
What was exciting for me talking to Christopher was he got it. You have to sometimes lay the breadcrumbs, right? Lay the breadcrumbs so they can follow what you're saying. He got it. I mean, he understood telemedicine. He understood we have to do something. It was so refreshing. I'm like, oh, can I have 5 more of you, please? Just
that segues perfectly to my current mission in life.
Jeez.
What is your current mission, Christopher?
So it's funny you mentioned oh my goodness, you got it. Well, I'm one of those weird, and again, it was more because my career had an iceberg that I had this change than any, grand plan on my own. But I'm one of those odd ducks as a practicing clinical physician with a lot of experience in tech and clinical research and in leadership. That's what I do now. I coach and mentor physician and healthcare leaders going into their first leadership position because, and this is uncomfortable to say, the clinicians need to be back in charge. All of the shenanigans that Beverly is combating and that I've described are because the captain of the team, which was the clinician, right? And typically the physician, but nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses have so much wealth of clinical experience. They need to step up and step in as well.
Yes.
But it's got to be a clinician that has the 30,000 foot view that is going to impact this, right? A administrator is going to have their agenda and that's fine for them, but it is not the same one that the patient is going to have. The only people in the healthcare system bound by an oath as a profession to make sure that, as you pointed out, April, that didn't know all of that sausage making happened behind the scenes, and you don't need to. What you need is care at the point of need, right? Right time, right care, right person, right place. And all of the rest can be completely invisible to you, but the only person or persons in the system that's going to represent that perspective faithfully, honestly, and with fidelity is going to be the clinician. And as my experience was, we get into these leadership positions sometimes as a trophy or a token because, well, we got to have a clinician around to give us the imprimatur that we know what we're doing in a healthcare leadership setting. And then they get put in the corner and told to color. She's like, that's an old Army and Marine joke to be like, hey, go sit over there and color. We don't want to hear from you. Or we don't know what we're doing because we're elevated to these leadership positions because of our clinical expertise and competence. But that doesn't translate into being able to lead, right? We lead in a clinical setting because we're authoritative, we're decisive, we're to the point, and we know what we're doing. And when we treat non-urgent situations like that, then we don't look like competent leaders, and we haven't learned, again, all of the different tools in the toolbox. And it disqualifies us from a lot of leadership positions or from excelling in them. And the ones that do stay, they stay so long, but they can't affect change because they may be the only clinical voice representing that patient perspective and that clinician agenda, and they just burn out. So if I'm really going to throw down the gauntlet and say, I'm sorry, the adults need to be back in charge, okay? Pull the car over, right? Mom or dad needs to drive now, and you had your chance, get in the back seat. Clinicians need to lead. Well, then we need to lead competently, and we need to know not just how to be authoritative in clinical situations at the bedside when there is a right answer, but how to motivate and inspire and develop when there isn't a right answer, because we're not the smartest person in the room anymore, and someone on our team or someone's together on our team are going to come up with the best answer if we help develop it out of them and empower them. And that's just not something that develops naturally from a bedside career.
Yeah.
But I want my cake and I want to have it eat too. I want there to be competent, comfortable leaders and mentors amongst clinicians, because I think that's the best way forward we have for making a very broken system a bit less broken.
Yeah. So you were touching on something right there, Christopher, and I'm curious about like burnout, right? Because of not having the leadership skills or having all that pressure put on one person. How do you work with them to support them, to avoid burnout or to inspire them, just as you were saying?
It really depends. And I mean, burnout is the word. I detest it because not because of the word, but because of how it's misused. Everyone thinks that they know what burnout is. And burnout is like any other set of symptoms or a syndrome. It has an underlying cause that may be very individual for the person experiencing it. I have a good colleague that actually conducted some formal research on this rather than just, making it up as she goes along, and found that amongst, narrow population, amongst physician leaders, that the main themes in burnout were a loss of clinical identity, a lack of support and mentorship, and a lack of leader development going into the leadership position. For other people that aren't in a leadership position, it really may be that they've been tasked to do yet one more thing that has nothing to do with what they loved about medicine. Do we really need to click another box in the EMR? Other people, it has nothing to do with their professional life. It's a personal issue. Their non-medical life is falling apart. Illness, divorce, financial crisis, what have you. It is not a one size fits all. And when health organizations take their employees and say, well, we just need more massage chairs and yoga classes in the physician's lounge to get these people to relax. It very well may be that people need to learn stress relief techniques because that's a time management stress relief issue, might be their source of burnout. But to say that is the one size fits all cause and solution, it's frankly crazy talk. So I start with trying to find out why the person's burnt out. I was burnt out for a very different reason when I, had my leadership calamity than other colleagues were. And to have their solution be applied to my issue would have been counterproductive in the extreme. So I think a diagnosis before a treatment is how I'd sum it up.
Of course. Yes. And I really appreciate you bringing forward that the term burnout, has been overused and it looks different for each person. And, wherever we go, there we are. So, even if we're high performing, in our jobs, like you said, behind the scenes, family dynamics, illness, sickness, grief, anything like that can definitely contribute to what burnout or basically, just spread too thin.
Yeah, and there's a common denominator that can either cause burnout or at some point the burnout you're experiencing for any reason will result in this, and that's what we would refer to as moral injury. So things within the healthcare system that interfere, thwart, or are completely at odds with the mission of a healthcare provider. What are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to be caring for that patient. Well, you have to do this thing. That's getting in the way of taking care. That's the opposite. It's not doing anything for the patient. It's harming them. But I have to do it anyway. Or if it is a behavioral health illness, substance abuse, personal problem, eventually that is going to degrade your performance, and not managing whatever your personal source of burnout is going to put you into a moral injury cycle because you're not giving your best potential to your patients and your team members that are taking care of patients. So that's honestly the most dangerous kind, and the one that we really need to wring out of the system first, which is if there's something we're doing in healthcare that does not have a positive externality for patient care, then, and we say it's necessary, we need to really assess why it's necessary. And if it isn't, then we need to get rid of it because it's not mission essential. So why are we doing it?
And again, it is to do no harm.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
To ourselves as providers, and to each other as providers, and to our patients. It's do no harm is not just a sole target.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. And Beverly, before we leave, do you have any last words to contribute, and then share where people can connect with you?
Last words, we're here to help. That's one of the questions we always ask. How can I help? It is our intent to leave you in a better position than after we showed up, so that again, we can be an asset to you, not a liability. I can be reached at healingforwounds.com, or you can email me via info@healing.com, or Beverly at healingforwounds.com. Either way, we're here to help. And I've said this before, we're Pied Pipers, and we're trying to change how we're all showing up, because we can all do better.
For sure. Thank you so much for all the value that you brought this evening, and the hard work that you and Tim are doing out in the field, and supporting your clients as well. So thank you for being a change maker.
Thank you for having us, April.
Yeah. Christopher, last words, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, and I just want to thank you again, April and Beverly. This has been a fantastic hour. I really appreciate the time. And if people want to get in touch with me, my website, functionalmentoring.com, or you can email me at christopher@functionalmentoring.com. My life thought partner, Dr. Paul Michaud, and I, we write about mentorship, leadership, relationship, followership. You should get all of your ships and your fleet sailing through if you want to get anywhere. And if you're interested in physician coaching or leadership development, Christopher@functionalmentoring.com. And if I'm not your cup of tea, we're a small community. I know so many physician coaches that are each our own different little flavor of ice cream. And getting in touch with one of us, I don't want to work with people that wouldn't be a good fit. It would be bad for both of us. So if I'm not your cup of tea, I can find you someone that is, and get your burnout and your leadership skills tightened up, and get you on the right path.
Great. Well, it was amazing hosting you too, and thank you so much for coming and sharing. Though we went a little deep at first, right? Talking about your experiences and leadership, and how that, brought into the healing and supporting your communities. So I so appreciate you both being here. And Tim, we missed you. Hope everything is going well out in the field. And those who are curious about the Hounds of Business, reach out to Mike Asherbranner. And Beverly and Christopher are also fellow Hounds. So if you're curious, come on in. It's safe in here.
The water's fine. Yep. The water's fine.
Water's fine. So have a great evening, everyone. Thank you both for being here, Christopher and Beverly. And I will see you next time.
Thank you, April. You're a great host. Good to see you again, Chris. Take care.
Be well.
Thank y'all for stopping by. Be sure to follow, share, and like, and send me a message if you had fun today. Y'all come back now.